two racist bikers at a gas station in Georgia thought they had found an easy target when they attack a black elderly woman alone inside the convenience store. What they didn't know was that this woman was Lucille O'Neal, mother of Shaq O'Neal, the legend of NBA. What Shaq did next shocked the entire country. Before continuing this amazing story, let us know where are you watching from. Also turn on notifications for daily stories like this. Let's begin the story. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the quiet gas station. It was one of those small-town stops along the highway, the kind with a single pump, a dusty parking lot, and a convenience store that smelled like old coffee and motor oil. A faded sign above the store read Joe's Gas and Goods, and the neon open sign flickered in the window. Lucille O'Neal pulled her car up to the pump and turned off the engine. She let out a small sigh, stretching her fingers over the steering wheel. It had been a long drive. She was on her way to visit family in Georgia, taking the scenic route through the South. Driving alone didn't bother her. She enjoyed the quiet time. But she always kept her guard up in places like this. She stepped out of the car, her tall frame moving with grace and strength. Even in her late 60s, Lucille carried herself with confidence. She wore a simple blue dress, comfortable sandals, and a pair of gold hoop earrings that glinted in the fading sunlight. Her short-cropped hair was neatly styled, and she had the look of a woman who had seen the world and wasn't easily shaken. As she reached for the gas pump, the low rumble of motorcycles broke the quiet. A group of bikers pulled into the lot, their loud engines shattering the peaceful evening. There were 5 of them, all wearing black leather vests with a red emblem on the back. Southern Sons. Lucille had seen men like them before. They had the kind of presence that made people look away, avoid eye contact, pretend not to notice. But Lucille noticed. She kept pumping gas, pretending to be unbothered as the bikers dismounted their bikes. They were big men, rough-looking with scruffy beards and tattoos snaking up their arms. One of them, a burly man with a beer belly and a thick gray beard, glanced in her direction. His eyes lingered on her, just a little too long. She ignored him. Inside the store, the cashier, a skinny young man with messy blonde hair, peeked through the window. His face tensed up as he saw the bikers. He knew them. Everyone in town did. They were trouble. The leader of the group, a tall man with a shaved head and a cigarette dangling from his lips, walked toward the store but stopped near Lucille's car. He looked her up and down, then smirked. "Well, well," he said, loud enough for his friends to hear. "Look what we got here." Lucille didn't react. She focused on the pump, willing it to finish faster. Another biker, younger, meaner looking, chuckled. "You lost, lady? This ain't the kind of place for your kind." Lucille exhaled through her nose, steady and calm. She had dealt with men like this before. She knew their game. She looked up, her eyes sharp. "I'm just getting gas," she said evenly. The leader took a step closer. "Yeah? Maybe you ought to take your gas and go. Some folks around here don't like strangers." The air felt heavier. The sun had dipped lower, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple. The cashier inside shifted nervously behind the counter, his fingers twitching near the phone. Lucille kept her cool. She finished pumping, put the nozzle back, and reached for her wallet. "I'll be out of here in a minute," she said, her voice steady. The older biker, the one with the gray beard, leaned against her car, arms crossed. "That's a real nice ride you got," he said. "Might be too nice for someone like you." Lucille's jaw tightened. She knew what they were doing, testing her, trying to get a rise out of her. But she wouldn't give them the satisfaction. She moved toward the store, but one of the bikers shifted in front of her, blocking her path. "Where's the fire, lady?" he sneered. Lucille met his gaze. "Move," she said firmly. The biker grinned, But before he could say anything, the gas station door swung open. "Hey!" The cashier's voice was shaky but determined. "You guys need to leave her alone." The bikers turned toward the kid, their expressions darkening. "Stay out of this, boy," the leader muttered. Lucille took the moment to step around them, walking straight into the store. The cashier swallowed hard, but didn't look away from the bikers. Lucille glanced at his name tag. Ethan. "Thanks, Ethan," she said softly. Ethan nodded, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. "You okay, ma'am?" Lucille managed a small smile. "I've been through worse." She grabbed a bottle of water and a pack of peanuts, then made her way to the counter. Lucille O'Neill stood tall, her phone gripped in her hand as the call connected. "Ma?" Shaq's deep voice came through the speaker. "Shaquille," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I need you." There was a pause. Then, his tone changed. "Where are you?" "A gas station outside of Montgomery," she said, eyes locked on the bikers in front of her. "Got some boys here trying to scare me." The leader of the bikers, the bald man with the cigarette, smirked. "What's that, old lady? Calling your little friends?" Lucille didn't answer him. She didn't have to. "Stay put," Shaq said. His voice was tight, controlled. "I'm coming." Lucille ended the call and slipped her phone into her purse. The bikers laughed among themselves. "Who'd you call?" The older biker with the gray beard sneered. "Your husband? Your grandkids?" Lucille met his gaze without flinching. "My son." The leader flicked his cigarette onto the ground and crushed it with his boot. "Lady, I don't think you understand where you are." He stepped closer. "You see, around here, we don't take kindly to people like you acting like you own the place." His voice was low, almost a whisper, but filled with menace. Lucille's heart pounded, but her face remained unreadable. "People like me?" she said, tilting her head. The younger biker with the knife laughed. "Yeah, you know exactly what we mean." The tension thickened in the air, heavy as the Alabama humidity. Lucille turned slightly, eyeing the gas station entrance. Ethan, the young cashier, was still watching from inside, his face pale. She could tell he wanted to help, but fear held him in place. She took a slow breath. "I don't have time for your nonsense. Move away from my car." The leader chuckled, shaking his head. "You got some mouth on you." Then, before she could react, he shoved her. It wasn't hard enough to knock her down, but it was meant to send a message. Lucille stumbled back a step, catching herself. A cold wave of anger rushed through her veins, but she didn't let it show. She straightened her shoulders. "That's the best you got?" The older biker laughed, slapping his knee. "Oh, I like this one. She's got fight in her." Lucille locked eyes with the leader. "If you think pushing an old woman makes you a tough man, you're weaker than I thought." That got to him. His smirk vanished. His jaw tightened. The younger biker, still flipping the knife in his hand, stepped forward. "Maybe we ought to teach her some manners." Lucille didn't move. She had faced real men in her life, real strength. These boys? They were bullies. And she had never bowed to bullies. The leader grabbed her arm. "You need to show some respect, lady." Lucille jerked her arm back. "And you need to keep your hands to yourself." The tension snapped. The younger biker lunged, grabbing Lucille's purse and yanking it hard. The strap broke, and he stumbled back, laughing as he held it up. "Oops." Lucille's patience burned away. "Give that back." The biker opened the purse, dumping its contents onto the ground. Wallet, keys, phone. "Aw, look at that," he taunted. "What's in here? Any money?" Lucille took a step toward him, but the older biker kicked her keys away, sending them skidding across the pavement. Inside the store, Ethan gasped. Lucille clenched her fists. "You boys don't know who you're messing with." The leader smirked. "Oh, we know exactly who we're messing with." Then, to her shock, one of them spit on her car. Lucille's whole body tensed. Another biker dragged his knife across the hood, leaving a long, ugly scratch. "You son of a—" The leader shoved her again, harder this time. Lucille stumbled, catching herself against the gas pump. Ethan bolted from the store. "Hey, stop it! Leave her alone!" The bikers turned to him. "You want to be a hero, kid?" The older one sneered. Ethan hesitated, but he didn't back down. "Just let her go, man. She ain't done nothing to you." The leader smirked. "You new in town?" Ethan swallowed. "Then let me explain how this works," the leader continued. "We do what we want, when we want, and nobody tells us otherwise." Lucille could see Ethan's hands shaking. "Go inside, son," she told him gently. "But now." Ethan hesitated, then turned and ran back into the store. The leader sighed, shaking his head. "See? That's the problem with people like you. Always making a scene. Always thinking you're somebody." Lucille exhaled slowly. "Oh, I know exactly who I am. And soon, you will too." The leader scoffed. "That so?" Then, he reached out and shoved her again. Lucille took a step back. But she didn't fall. She didn't break. She just smiled. Because she knew something they didn't. She knew her son. And he was on his way. Lucille stood firm, her heartbeat steady despite the danger around her. She had faced many challenges in life, raising her children alone, working hard to provide for them, teaching them strength, dignity, and resilience. She wasn't about to let a bunch of ignorant thugs shake her now. The leader of the bikers smirked as he watched her. "Ain't so tough now, huh?" Lucille didn't respond. She knew better than to argue with fools. Instead, she focused on what mattered. Shaq was coming. The younger biker, the one with the knife, kicked at her scattered belongings on the ground. "What kind of phone you got?" He bent down, picking it up. "Might just keep this for myself." Lucille lifted her chin. "Go ahead. But I promise you, the person on the other end of that call is the last man you want to mess with." The biker chuckled. "Oh yeah? And who's that?" Before Lucille could answer, the phone buzzed in his hand. Incoming call. Shaquille O'Neal. The laughter stopped. The bikers exchanged glances, confused at first. Then, the leader squinted at the screen, reading the name again. His smirk returned, but there was something different in his eyes now. A flicker of doubt. "No way," he muttered. Lucille folded her arms. "Try me." The younger biker hesitated, then tapped the screen and put the call on speaker. "Ma?" Shaq's voice filled the air. Lucille stayed calm. "I'm here, baby." "Where exactly are you?" She gave him the gas station's name, her voice even. "I'm 10 minutes away," Shaq said. His tone was sharp, controlled, but Lucille could hear the anger simmering beneath it. The leader of the bikers chuckled, shaking his head. "Hold on, Shaquille O'Neal? The Shaquille O'Neal?" Lucille raised an eyebrow. "The one and only." The bikers looked at each other. One of them even laughed. "Come on, man, she's bluffing." The leader, however, wasn't so sure. Shaq's voice came through the phone again, low and firm. "Put my mother back on." The young biker holding the phone hesitated, suddenly unsure of himself. Lucille reached out and snatched it from his hand. "I'm still here," she said. "Ma, stay put. Don't say a word to them. I'm almost there." Lucille smiled slightly. "I know, baby. I'll see you soon." She hung up. For a moment there was silence. Then the older biker scoffed. "So what? We supposed to be scared 'cause your kid plays basketball?" Lucille didn't answer. But the gas station door swung open and Ethan stepped out again, his phone in hand. I think she's telling the truth," he said, eyes wide. He turned the phone screen toward the bikers. It was a live news feed. A local station was covering a Shaquille O'Neal charity event just a few miles away. The screen showed Shaq standing on stage, shaking hands with kids, until suddenly, he pulled out his phone, checked something, and his entire expression changed. Then, right there on live television, he handed the mic to someone else and stormed off stage. One of the bikers let out a nervous chuckle. "No way!" Ethan scrolled down. "And, people online already know about this." He turned his phone again. Protect Lucille was trending. Lucille O'Neal's name was flooding social media. Someone at the charity event had recognized the call, and now thousands of people were watching, waiting. The leader's smirk faded. "This some kind of joke?" Lucille smiled. "Do I look like I'm joking?" The young biker cursed under his breath. "Man, we don't need this kind of heat." "Shut up," the leader snapped. He turned back to Lucille. "I don't care who your kid is. You don't belong here." Lucille exhaled slowly. "And yet, here I am." The leader's fingers twitched like he wanted to hit her again. Then, the distant sound of a deep, powerful engine. A large black SUV barreled down the road, moving fast. The bikers turned toward the sound. Lucille just smiled. "Looks like my ride's here." The roar of the SUV's engine grew louder, rumbling like distant thunder. The bikers turned, their cocky grins slipping just a little. Lucille remained still, her arms folded across her chest. She wasn't worried, not anymore. A black Escalade screeched into the gas station lot, tires kicking up dust as it came to a sharp stop. The driver's door swung open, and before anyone could react, Shaquille O'Neal stepped out. And suddenly, the bikers weren't laughing anymore. At 7 feet 1 inch and over 300 pounds, Shaq wasn't just big, he was huge. He wasn't some soft celebrity. He was a man who had spent years battling giants on the court, lifting weights like they were toys, and training in mixed martial arts for fun. And right now, he looked furious. His sharp eyes scanned the scene in an instant. His mother standing tall, her purse and belongings scattered on the ground, her car vandalized. The bikers, frozen in place. The gas station kid standing near the door, wide-eyed. Shaq clenched his jaw. Slowly, he shut the SUV's door and took a step forward. The ground seemed to shake. Lucille finally spoke, her voice calm. "Took you long enough." Shaq's eyes didn't leave the bikers. "Had to make sure I wasn't going to do something stupid." The leader of the bikers forced a smirk, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Well, look who it is. The big man himself." Shaq didn't respond. He just kept walking, slow, controlled, dangerous. The younger biker with the knife shuffled backward. "Yo, maybe we should—" The leader shot him a glare. "Shut up." Shaq stopped right in front of them. Up close, he was even more terrifying. His fists were the size of most men's heads. His broad shoulders looked like they could bulldoze through a brick wall. And his eyes? Cold. "You put hands on my mother?" His voice was low, steady, deadly. The leader swallowed hard. "Now hold on, big guy. This ain't got nothing to do with you." Shaq tilted his head. "Nothing to do with me?" He let out a short, humorless laugh. "You messed with my mom." He took another step closer. The leader instinctively backed up, just a little. "You think I'm just gonna let that slide?" The older biker, trying to act tough, crossed his arms. "Look, man, we didn't know she was your mom. And even if we did, so what? This is our town. We do what we want." Shaq's eyes narrowed. Not anymore. The leader's smirk returned, forced this time. "Listen, we don't want trouble." Shaq raised an eyebrow. "You are trouble." The leader shifted, glancing at his crew. "I mean, come on, man. What, you gonna hit us? That wouldn't look too good, huh? Big celebrity like you?" Shaq didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even breathe. Then, so fast no one saw it coming, one of the bikers lunged. A mistake. The man swung his fist, but Shaq caught it, like it was nothing. There was a brief pause as the biker realized his entire hand was swallowed in Shaq's grip. And then, Shaq squeezed. The biker yelped, his knees buckling from the pain. Shaq yanked him forward, bringing their faces inches apart. "You think you're tough," Shaq growled. The biker winced, trying to pull back, but Shaq didn't let go. "You like picking on old women?" He squeezed harder. The biker groaned in pain. "You got all that mouth when it's just you and your little gang." Shaq leaned in, his voice ice cold. "Where's that energy now?" The leader took a step forward. "Let him go, man." Shaq turned his head, slowly, deliberately. The leader hesitated. Shaq let the biker go with a small shove. The man stumbled backward, clutching his throbbing hand. "You got a choice," Shaq said, his voice level. "You apologize to my mother, right now, or I make you." The leader licked his lips, glancing at his crew. And then, more motorcycles rumbled in the distance. 5, 6, 7 more bikers, pulling up fast. The young biker with the knife grinned. "You done messed up now." Lucille sighed. "Oh, Lord." Shaq cracked his knuckles. "Good," he muttered. "I was just getting started." The gas station lot filled with the rumble of more motorcycles. 7 new bikers pulled up, their engines growling like hungry wolves. They wore the same gang insignia as the others, a snarling skull with crossed chains. Shaq didn't move. He just watched, measured, calculated. Lucille sighed, shaking her head. "You boys sure do like making bad decisions." The leader smirked, confidence returning. "See, big man? You ain't as scary as you think. Now it's just you and Mommy against all of us." Shaq rolled his shoulders. "That so?" One of the new bikers stepped off his ride, pulling out a metal chain and wrapping it around his fist. Another flipped open a switchblade. The rest spread out, circling Shaq and Lucille like vultures. Inside the store, Ethan held his breath. He wanted to call the cops, but he already knew what would happen. The town sheriff wouldn't lift a finger against the bikers. Shaq glanced at his mother. "Ma, you all right?" Lucille dusted off her blouse, completely unfazed. "I was just fine till these fools showed up." Shaq cracked a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. His focus was still on the men in front of him. The leader took a step forward. "Now, here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna get in that fancy SUV, take your mama, and drive the hell out of here. You leave, and maybe, we let you go in one piece." Shaq tilted his head. "That's funny. I was about to tell you the same thing." The leader gritted his teeth. "Man, you got a death wish or something?" "Not at all." Shaq's voice was calm, unshaken. "But I promise you this. You lay a single hand on my mother again, and I'm putting every one of you on the floor." The leader barked out a laugh. "You think you can take all of us?" Shaq exhaled slowly. "I know I can." The bikers shifted, uneasy now. Some of them had seen Shaq fight before, not on a basketball court, but real fights. Street fights. Fights where men a whole lot tougher than them got dropped like sacks of bricks. The leader, though, wasn't backing down. "You really think we care who you are? You're just another—" "That's enough." The voice came from behind them, deep, steady, firm. The bikers turned, all of them. A man stood near the garage entrance, mid-50s, built like a brick wall, grease-stained hands gripping a heavy wrench. He had a thick gray beard, cold blue eyes, and a stare that could stop a charging bull. The gas station mechanic. Lucille's lips curled in recognition. Well now, about time somebody with sense showed up. The leader scowled. "Stay out of this, Mason." Mason didn't move, didn't blink, didn't look one bit afraid. "Y'all really think you're tough, jumping an old woman?" His voice was calm, but it carried weight. The leader scoffed. "Man, we ain't—" "Don't lie to me, son," Mason cut him off. The bikers fell silent. Because Mason wasn't just some random mechanic. He was a legend in this town. A man who had seen things, done things, fought things. He was respected and feared. Mason's gaze shifted to Shaq. "I don't reckon you need any help." Shaq gave a small nod. "I don't." Mason's lip twitched. "Didn't think so." But then, he pulled out his phone and dialed. The leader's eyes narrowed. "Who the hell you calling?" Mason smirked. "A few friends." Within seconds, the sound of truck engines rumbled in the distance. 3 pickup trucks pulled up, fast, and men started getting out. Big men, rough men, local mechanics, construction workers, off-duty firefighters. Men who had dealt with these bikers before and weren't afraid to do it again. The leader cursed under his breath. He turned back to his crew. "We don't need this kind of trouble." "You already got it," Mason cut in. The bikers hesitated. They weren't used to being outnumbered, and for the first time that night, they were. Shaq took another step forward. "Last chance," he said. "You walk away now, or you get put down." The leader ground his teeth. His hands clenched into fists. Then, he made the choice. "Let's go," he muttered. One by one, the bikers started backing up. Some muttered curses, some glared, but none of them made a move. They climbed onto their bikes. Engines roared to life. And within moments, they were gone. The gas station lot fell into silence. Lucille sighed. "Well, that was dramatic." Shaq turned to Mason. "I appreciate it." Mason shrugged. "I just don't like bullies." Lucille stepped forward, giving Mason a long look. "You got good in you, Mr. Mason." Mason smirked. "Don't go spreading that around. I got a reputation to keep." Lucille chuckled. Shaq bent down, picking up his mother's purse and handing it to her. "You good, Ma?" Lucille took it with a smirk. "You know I am." Shaq shook his head with a small laugh. "You're something else," Lucille patted his cheek. "Took you long enough to figure that out." Mason crossed his arms. "Sheriff's probably going to pretend he didn't hear about this, but word's already spreading. Those boys won't try this again, at least not in this town." Shaq nodded. "Appreciate that." Mason looked him up and down. "You really were going to take all of them, huh?" Shaq shrugged. "I like my odds," Mason chuckled. "Next time, give me a call first. I ain't as fast as I used to be, but I throw a mean right hook." Shaq grinned. "I'll keep that in mind." Lucille exhaled, shaking her head. "Now, can we please go get something to eat? This nonsense done made me hungry." Shaq laughed. "Whatever you want, Ma." He opened the SUV door for her. As Lucille climbed in, she glanced back at Mason. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Mason." Mason nodded. "You too, ma'am." With that, Shaq got in the driver's seat. The Escalade pulled out of the lot, and the town would never forget what happened that night. The next morning, the whole town was talking. The biker gang, once feared, once untouchable, had been humiliated. People who had always been too afraid to speak out were now coming forward. Stories, witnesses, evidence. The gang's reign of terror was coming to an end. Sheriff Don McAllister sat at his desk, rubbing his temples. He had been the sheriff for 20 years, and the bikers had always been a problem. But he never did anything about it. Not because he couldn't, because he didn't want to. He had history with some of those men, old favors, dirty secrets, connections. But now, the whole country was watching, because someone had leaked the video that changed everything. A bystander at the gas station had recorded everything, from the moment the bikers harassed Lucille to the moment Shaq put them in their place. The video hit the internet that night. By morning, it was everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, news stations, millions of views, Millions of angry people. People demanding justice. Shaq takes action. Shaq wasn't just going to let this slide. He called his lawyers, his contacts, his friends in high places. A civil rights attorney got involved. The FBI started asking questions. Reporters swarmed the town. The sheriff tried to downplay it. A simple misunderstanding, he told the press. But no one was buying it. Shaq didn't just call out the bikers. He called out the whole system. "This isn't just about my mother," Shaq said in an interview. "This is about every person who has been bullied, threatened, or ignored. This is about making sure it never happens again." Within a week, arrests started. The leader of the bikers? Turns out, he had a long criminal record: assault, drug trafficking, illegal weapons. With the FBI watching, there was no more protection. One by one, his crew fell apart. Some skipped town, some got arrested, some turned on each other. The biker gang that had controlled the town for years? Gone. Mason, and the town's changing tide Mason, wasn't one for the spotlight, but he became a local hero. People who had been silent for too long started speaking up. Small business owners, neighbors, even former gang members, all came forward to say, enough is enough. And with the bikers out of the picture, the town finally started to change. Shaq wasn't done. He didn't just want to stop the bad guys, he wanted to build something good. So he bought the gas station, and then the vacant lot next to it. A month later, construction started on a brand new community center, a place for kids to stay safe, for teens to learn job skills, for families to come together. And Mason? Shaq made him the manager. "Somebody's got to keep these kids in line," Shaq told him, "and I figure you've got some experience with that." Mason smirked. "You have no idea." At the grand opening of the O'Neill Community Center, Lucille stood on stage next to Shaq. She looked out at the crowd, black, white, young, old. This town had changed, and she had one last thing to say. "Y'all listen to me," she said, her voice strong. "Hate don't build nothing. Fear don't fix nothing. But when folks stand together, ain't nothing in this world that can break us." The crowd erupted in applause. And Shaq? He just smiled. Because his mother was right. She always was. The sun was setting over the town as Shaq stood on the stage of the newly built O'Neill Community Center. The building behind him was a symbol of change, a modern space with basketball courts, classrooms, and a mentorship program. The town's past of division and fear was still there. But now there was hope. The crowd had gathered, families, children, local business owners, even people who had once stayed silent. They were here because they had seen what courage could do. Shaq took a deep breath, looking out at the people before him. Then he turned to his mother. Lucille stood proudly beside him, dressed in her finest, her eyes full of wisdom, her posture full of strength. And Shaq felt something deep in his chest. The speech that shook the town. He stepped up to the microphone. For a moment he didn't speak. He just let the weight of the moment settle. Then, in a voice steady but full of emotion, he began. "My whole life, my mama taught me to be strong." He glanced at Lucille, his eyes softening. "She taught me to stand tall, to work hard, to never let fear win." Lucille nodded, pride shining in her eyes. "But even the strongest people shouldn't have to stand alone." The crowd fell silent. What happened that night at the gas station? Shaq shook his head. "That wasn't just about my mama. It wasn't just about me. It was about all of us. Every person who's been told they don't belong, who's been made to feel small, who's had to fight just to be treated like a person." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Shaq's voice grew deeper, stronger. "We could have walked away. We could have let it go. but my mama didn't raise me like that. And this town doesn't have to live in fear anymore. People started clapping, then cheering. But Shaq wasn't done. He turned to Mason, who was standing near the front. The old mechanic, usually so tough, looked a little misty-eyed. People like Mason stood up. People who could have stayed quiet, who could have looked the other way. But they didn't. Mason gave a small nod. Shaq looked back at the crowd. And now, it's on us to keep standing up, to make sure the next generation never has to fight this same fight. The applause was deafening. People rose to their feet. Tears ran down some faces. Because this wasn't just a speech. This was a new beginning. As the cheers died down, Lucille took the microphone. She didn't need notes. She didn't need preparation. She just spoke from the heart. This town got some scars. And scars don't go away overnight. She let that sit for a moment. But you know what scars mean? It means you healed. The crowd nodded. Now healing don't mean forgetting. It don't mean pretending things were never bad. It just means we decide to be better, to do better. And I believe deep in my soul that we can. Her voice was steady, wise, unshaken. So let's not waste this moment, y'all. Let's take this chance and make something real out of it. The crowd roared. Lucille stepped back, handing the microphone to Shaq. And for the first time all night, Shaquille O'Neal had to wipe away a single tear. The excitement from the grand opening of the O'Neal Community Center didn't fade overnight. It wasn't just a building. It was a statement, a promise that the town would never go back to the way it was. Shaq wasn't done. He met with town officials, business leaders, and local educators. He wanted real change, a scholarship fund for kids who wanted to go to college, a mentorship program for young men and women looking for guidance, a local business grant to help small shops rebuild after years of gang control. This wasn't just a one-time donation. Shaq was investing in the future, and people noticed. More donations started pouring in. Companies reached out to help. Even former doubters started to believe. The town was changing. The bikers' unexpected redemption. Not everyone in the biker gang had been arrested. Some had fled, some had gone into hiding, and one of them came back. His name was Jesse Tate, a young guy, barely 25. Unlike the others, Jesse had never been fully committed to the gang's hatred. He grew up in that world, but after what happened at the gas station, he couldn't live with himself. One afternoon, while Shaq was overseeing the community center's final touches, Jesse walked in. Mason was the first to notice him. "Well, look who it is," Mason muttered, crossing his arms. The room got real quiet. Jesse looked down, his face full of shame. He hesitated, then looked Shaq in the eye. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry." Nobody spoke. Jesse swallowed hard. I was there that night. I didn't stop it. I didn't try. And I've been thinking about it ever since." He shook his head. "I don't want to be that guy anymore." Shaq studied him. He'd seen fake apologies before. But Jesse's? It was real. Shaq exhaled. "You serious about changing?" Jesse nodded. "Yeah, I don't know where to start. But, yeah." Shaq glanced at Mason. Mason let out a sigh, then gave a small nod. Might be worth giving him a chance. Shaq turned back to Jesse. "You willing to work?" Jesse straightened up. "Yes, sir." Shaq nodded. "All right. You start tomorrow. Community center needs more hands." Jesse's eyes widened. "Wait, you mean you'll actually let me?" "Everyone deserves a chance," Shaq said firmly. "But don't waste it." Jesse nodded fast. "I won't! I swear!" And just like that, a former enemy became part of the movement, building something that lasts. The community center opened its doors to everyone. Kids played basketball in the courts Shaq built. Teens learned job skills from Mason. Mothers found support groups, and fathers signed up to mentor young men. The town wasn't perfect, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like a place where people could breathe. A place where fear wasn't the law of the land. And it all started because one woman refused to be intimidated, and one son refused to stay silent. Months passed, and the town felt different. The streets, once ruled by fear, were now filled with life. Kids played outside without worry, businesses flourished, and the tension that had once gripped the town slowly began to fade. The O'Neill Community Center became the heart of it all. And on a bright Sunday morning, Shaq and Lucille returned for a town gathering. The old gas station where the nightmare had started was now a youth center. The biker gang? Gone. The corrupt sheriff? Forced to resign after an internal investigation. The community? Thriving. Jesse, the former gang member, was now working full-time at the center. He had become a mentor, guiding young men away from the same path he had once walked. And Mason? He had become a respected leader, the kind of man people turned to for wisdom and fairness. As the town gathered in front of the community center, Shaq took the stage one last time. He looked out at the crowd, faces that had once been divided, now standing together. "This town has been through a lot," Shaq began, his deep voice carrying weight. "But look at us now. Look at what we built." A cheer rippled through the crowd. "When I came here, I didn't know if we could fix this. I didn't know if change was possible." He glanced at Mason, then at Jesse, then at his mother. "But my mama always says, you don't change the world by talking, you change it by doing." Lucille smiled, nodding in approval. "And that's what y'all did. You stood up, you fought for something better, and you proved that hate will never win." The crowd erupted into applause. Lucille took the microphone. Her voice, full of wisdom, rang through the air. "I know some of y'all are still healing, and that's okay. Healing takes time." She looked around, her gaze settling on Jesse. "People make mistakes. We all do. But what matters is what we do next. Do we stay in the dark, or do we step into the light?" Jesse lowered his head, taking in her words. Lucille smiled. "I say we choose the light." As the event ended, Shaq and Lucille stood together, watching the town come alive. Mason laughed with a group of kids. Jesse helped set up chairs for an evening gathering. Parents shook hands, neighbors shared stories, and people weren't afraid anymore. Lucille patted Shaq's arm. "You did good, baby." Shaq shook his head. "No, Mama, we did good." Lucille smiled. "That's right." As they walked away, the sound of children's laughter filled the air. Hope had taken root, and it was here to stay. Guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story. Let us know about your thoughts in the comment section. Also, subscribe the channel for daily stories notification.